Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. I'm in Max. Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Why, hello, and welcome to Season 25, Episode 13 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
This is Tappy.
And Tomes.
And Tomes is joining us again. Thank you. Appreciate it. In this episode of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast, Axel from the UK writes in about the merits of failure. Hive Mind has discovered the joys of non-hippie gaming. That's my own editorializing. Greg in Virginia Beach sends a horror story, and then another horror story dealing with the first one. It's so good. Oh my god, I don't want to spoil it. But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. We're on the social medias. We're on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and MeWe, Happy Jacks RPG, all one word. That's Happy Jacks RPG, all one word. And we have a forum, happyjacksforum.com. That's happyjacksforum.com. If you'd like to watch the show live, we stream it at 7:03 p.m. Pacific time at happyjacks.org/live. That's happyjacks.org/live on Friday nights, 7:03 p.m. Pacific time. And then we have a game convention coming up President's Day weekend in February at the beautiful Hilton LAX Hotel.
Of course we do.
Yes. I
totally remembered that.
I didn't book. I can't even remember to book a room. I keep forgetting. All right.
You book before they even do the deal and stuff.
I usually do. Yeah.
Yeah. I did. You remember the? I told you about the Airbnb I booked. That the air conditioning broke.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that again. I'm probably going to get a hotel.
Well, in February it may not be so bad to not have AC.
Yeah, but I'm not going to book the exact same one. Definitely.
Yeah, they'll probably have it fixed. It'll be stuck on. You walk inside, it's 50 degrees.
Well, also that it was held in by a cardboard box that was put in the window. Like the window had the glass out, and so there's the window AC that wasn't attached to anything, just plugged in with a cardboard box
just
wedged
kind of
onto
balanced
it.
there.
Yeah.
I'm convinced Airbnb doesn't work for our con because, I don't know, Lokio's come twice, and every time he comes and does an Airbnb, there's just horror stories. So I don't know.
Well, some of the cities around LAX are not the nicest places in the world.
I suppose if you're trying to save money from the already not super crazy expensive hotel, that is just then you're looking at the cheaper rates.
Yeah. Right. And you're going to get them.
They're cheap for a reason.
Right.
But they do come with good stories. You got to talk to Lokio about his last.
I haven't heard any stories about this.
Unlicensed hotels. Turns out not always the best idea.
I've always had good luck with Airbnb.
Yeah.
Bill and I stayed at an Airbnb when we went to Gen Con 2 or 3 years ago, whenever it was, not 2017. It was owned by a woman who was a state representative, and it was the condo that she used when the legislature was in session.
Oh.
And then she lived wherever her district was. So when it wasn't in session, she used it as an Airbnb, and that was really nice.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they left us breakfast food. They left us a pound of bacon and a dozen eggs and a loaf of bread, and asked what kind of beer we liked. And
chili. No chili.
No. But I mean, she stocked the refrigerator for us.
Nice.
And said, what kind of, she asked Bill, what kind of beer do you want? And he says, whatever sort of local brews you have, because that's what we're beer snobs. Okay. And we had some lovely local beers, and we had food for breakfast every morning. It was awesome. And then I've only stayed in 2. The other one was in Sugarloaf, which is the little city sort of southeast of Big Bear.
Yeah, I know Sugarloaf.
But they have all the skiing.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it was in that we went there in August.
Right.
But it was before the kids started school, and it was nice.
Those are both nice areas, though, too.
Well, Sugarloaf is kind of a sketchy place. It's. Have you been up there lately?
Well, not in a long time, but I mean, you have a lot of tourist money going into it.
Yes, absolutely. And, I mean, Big Bear. That's where the money is in Big Bear, but Sugarloaf is like the inexpensive place to live up there. There's one area where they're building McMansions, and it's it's the weirdest thing in the world.
Oh my gosh!
You're driving through this mountain forest town, and all of a sudden there's a subdivision of, I don't know if people have McMansions in other parts of the country, but here space is at a premium. So they build these enormous 2,500, 3,000 square foot homes, 2 stories.
There's two designs.
Yes.
One each right next to each other.
And they come in one shade of beige. Mm-hmm. and
Taupe, I believe it
yes,
might be.
and you can literally stand between the houses and hold your hands like this and touch both walls. I mean, there's literally barely enough room to get your trash cans through, right? Yeah, it's the strangest thing. But then you go past that, then you get to actual Sugarloaf proper, and it's like you're in the Tules. I mean, there's some characters up there. People paint their houses that whatever color they want, and there's some people have like these weird sculptures in the front of their houses. What's that? The Hello Kitty place in
Sanrio?
Yeah, isn't there like an amusement park?
Sanrio Pearland. It is an entertainment extravaganza of a scale I cannot adequately describe to you. It's one of the best places I've ever been.
Okay. This is what I would
It's
imagine
amazing.
it would look like if they didn't have a budget. That's what some of these places look like. It was a lot.
Oh my god, I have to go there.
A lot of character, but I mean
That sounds like my jam.
right. It was. I thought about that would be my exit strategy. My retirement would be to sell my house and move to a little mountain village. And then I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. First off, it's expensive. I mean, the houses aren't. But grocery bill. Oh, I went to a Vaughn's and I bought like enough food to make, because I had a couple things we forgot, and I don't know, not much, like 2 grocery bags worth of food, and it was like $95. And I did not buy expensive stuff. I mean, down here it would have been like 30. So, but yeah, everything up there's a premium because you got to put it on a truck and haul it up that hill.
Can you hunt squirrel?
I don't know how to dress a squirrel.
Well, you're gonna learn.
I would have to learn.
Yeah.
Yes. And they're little and
Yeah.
fast. It'd be hard to hit.
In other words, you would become one of these characters after some short period of time.
Right.
Got it.
It happens real fast. Let me tell you something.
I just figured go to a little cabin, write
Yeah.
my manifestos.
Yeah, and before you know it, you're a naked guy with a gun defending trash. And it took me 4 months to do that.
All right. The Merits of Failure from Axel in the UK. Some of the most important RPG moments didn't come from final battles or great endings to long-running campaigns, but from epic failures! Exclamation point. Often from epic failures! Often this did not look like fun at the time, but in hindsight, failures made the game so much more exciting. For example, there was an attempt to sneak up on a bunch of bad boss guys, where the character not only failed the sneaky part, but also tripped, fell, and broke his arm. The party was discovered, hurt, and captured. Another time, a low-level fighter PC had a friendly practice duel against an important NPC knight in full plate armor, where a succession of weird die rolls in a crunchy system allowed the NPC resulted in the NPC accidentally getting stabbed in the eye and killed on the spot. All kinds of confusion ensued. Some failures have become no mere hedge mage type stories for our group of friends, with many more a nostalgic retelling. Just for those new listeners out there, the no mere hedge mage story happened in a D&D 5th edition campaign I ran, and
Because you couldn't kill him in 4th.
no,
Yeah.
it's hard to kill them in 5th too. But they finally got to the level where I figured they could take on a mage who had fireball, right? It wouldn't like just wipe the party. So he had help. He had like some minions and some other stuff, and I had made the mistake of giving the party 2 rhinoceroses, which they rode.
Of course you did.
They got them from orcs, and they were stopped on the. He stopped them on the road, and they bantered back and forth. And he said, "I am no mere hedge mage." And then we rolled for initiative, and I rolled like a 3 for his initiative, and everyone in the party rolled much higher than that. And before he even got a chance to take a spell off, they had killed not only him, but almost all of the minions in a single turn. So from that point on, they were not afeard of no mere hedge mages. Anyway, so I'm advocating failure. Misses, botches, non-successes, storked rolls, things going horribly wrong. A succeed at a cost mechanism can generate great complications by adding a failure component to success, a perfect tool to keep things interesting. However, I see a tendency of succeed at a cost being overused in many games in an attempt at quote unquote winning. The old "nope, you can't do it" can be frustrating to players, and modern "of course I can just about do it. Now let's figure out what cost we can agree on" can be frustrating to GMs. In some systems, Fate being the most prominent example, failing has become somewhat optional. A succession of succeed at a major cost should result in the players having painted themselves into a corner that will be really difficult to get out of. But since most GMs most GMs want to avoid a TPK, so the players will often survive. So instead of failures creating new problems, succeeding at a cost leads to winning against all odds. In more traditional, in quotes, games, the PCs would have never gotten that far and ended up in a less serious mess after the first failed roll. So call me old-fashioned, but let them fail. I generally prefer the "nope, try something else" to the constant "yes, but." Succeed at a cost is great, but not each and every time. Also, it's hard to be creative and come up with fun complications to simple actions that happen frequently. I've had that experience myself. What do you think? Looking forward to your insights. Axel from the UK.
I've got thoughts.
Go ahead.
Me too.
All right. So, I mean, first of all, I know a lot of us are a little bit older and grew up during an age where RPGs were there, but like video games weren't really, right? And I think one of the things that I definitely remember growing up with is like how it satisfies that itch of being able to do like tactical combat, like kind of like the wargamey part of RPGs and all that kind of thing. And with a lot of that, like you have to use kind of like your wargamey wits or like your knowledge of the game to kind of, excel, right? And so, yeah, if you're not going to be smart about it, whatever smart means for that game, then you're not going to get that far, right? And I mean, there's always the randomizers and all that stuff as well. But I think like there's a lot of, I don't see a problem, one, with players not wanting to fail. Like, let's say people want to play that hero game. I mean, that's kind of what D&D sometimes does. Yeah. Like, especially if you're talking about like AL and like Adventure League and that kind of thing. It's supposed to foster that, like, we're heroes and we're going on a long journey thing, right?
I'm so glad you made sure we knew it was Adventure League.
Yeah. For those viewers at home that I'm sure are lost. But, yeah. There's
I thought you meant American League. And it's like, yeah, fuck DH.
There's so many like kind of things that can scratch different itches, right? So like there's a lot of board games now, like, games like Pandemic or whatever, right? Oh, yeah. And so it's the same kind of thing with RPGs. I think there's this wide spectrum of like the different difficulty levels you want, and some of that's based on the game and some of that's based on the person running the game. And I mean, I'm totally down for learning how to fail. I think it's really important for players over the course of their experience to try that and see how it feels and if they enjoy it or not. And there's going to be some gamers who don't, right?
Oh, sure.
But like some of these games, like not just incentivize it, but there's like games built around it, right? So you've got like your tragic horror games like 10 Candles, or even things like Dread, where that tower's going to fall and somebody's going to get fucked, maybe a couple of times, right? Mm-hmm. And so like I think there's something to be said, like, yes, failure's good, but there's also that part where it's like, do the players want to do it or not? Like, I mean, I know my kind of players that I game with regularly are totally down for, self-sabotaging, like saying a good story, or like being open to the randomness, like, will we succeed or fail at this thing? Like, that's part of the excitement of rolling the dice, right? We don't roll the dice for no reason. We roll it when it's going to have some kind of cool outcome, right? And then we're going to roll with it, right? But, some players don't seem to handle that kind of as well, or they might be newer, or they might not be as interested in exploring that thing. And so I think it can go all sorts of different ways. I mean, I'll open the floor. There's a couple things I want to talk about in regards to specific systems that do this really cool.
Okay.
But I'm happy to chill for a second.
Go ahead.
All right, cool. Good Society. Have you guys heard of this game?
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the like Jane Austen RPG type game. One of the things that it does so exceedingly well is it has these tokens, right? Resolve tokens. And one of the ways that it's used, it's not a game with dice, and there isn't this kind of like rolling to see what happens. Instead, during a situation, like I as a player might be like, ooh, I want to see your character fail, or I want to see my own character fail. Like, I'm basically going to pay for that, right? Like, I want to see Tappy's little debutante like trip on her dress, like walking into the place, because it's going to be really embarrassing, with the scene that we'd set up, especially because she's trying to look so cool in front of this, whoever. And I'll pay you to do that, right? Now, whether you take that token or not, that's up to you. Mm-hmm. So there's still some control here as the player and as the character. Maybe you have something better in mind, but I can kind of like pay you off to do that failure. And then you get this kind of resource that you can then spend later on to do one thing or another, right? There's another game I played recently called Dream Askew, right? And it's like a PBTA post-apocalyptic game, but it's also like GM-less. So like the GM authority stuff's been shared around the table, but again, it does this thing where you're not rolling dice to succeed or get the middle result or kind of get the weak result. Instead, you make your character get the weak result, you get a token, right? Oh, okay. You later want to spend a token to get that strong result, you do that. And that's simplifying it. Like you can also like buy off other people's weak results and things like that. So both of these games are kind of playing with how do we tell an enjoyable story together, but by kind of like helping each other spend this like failures and successes and things like that. And so I mean, there's so many games out now that like you can really play with the spectrum of how much do you want to fail or not fail, right?
Wow, that's so hippie. I think I got a contact high. Woo!
I think a lot of these games are trying to sort of create an economy to emulate the hero's journey, because the hero's journey is not success. I can't talk. But I mean, there's successes and setbacks and successes and setbacks, and to me at least, those setbacks make those successes
it makes
so
the
much
story.
Sweeter.
It's so great.
Right.
Like that's the reason we watch these movies and stuff, right? Is because we're watching them try to succeed. But there's those setbacks.
Right. I think though, when you start talking about failure in this context of like story, and we're telling a great story together, we start to lose a lot of some of the like one person playing a role of one character that a lot of like more traditional RPGs are doing. So I think if we start losing ourselves in what does fail mean, how can we have fail to become a good story, we actually kind of lose what we're actually talking about here.
Someone called a lot of the more modern RPGs almost like a television writer's simulation.
I mean,
it's a writing room.
People even use the word writer's room now in game. Like I hear that in that space a lot. Like, we're going to writer's room this, and then that means we're going to sit down, do the little chat, and like set it up. And sometimes that works fabulously. Sometimes it's very metagamey, and if you're not looking for that kind of experience,
right? I mean, like there are some people who really like that type of game. I have found for myself that I find that type of game less satisfying than taking on a role and having somebody like give a story that I can interact with, or a world that I can interact with. But with that being said, like one of the things that I think we get used to when you say like old RPGs or like video games and stuff, we get used to this idea that there's this sliding scale of difficulty, and every easy action should be like a 5. And you can try anything you want, but it might be 100, which means you definitely are not going to hit that DC or target number or whatever. But that doesn't work in all games anymore. That doesn't work in PBTA. Like, you don't have minuses. If you can roll, like in Apocalypse World, if you can roll to act under fire, like to sneak up on somebody, and the fire is him finding you. If you can roll, you can
always have a chance. So I have two thoughts on this, because I've heard this before, and I know even like recently, I think there was a comment that you made, like maybe in the last week or two, about how we're talking about like simulation versus like PBTA games, and you're absolutely right. If you give the players the dice, they're going to have a chance of success regardless. Right. But the question is, what are the stakes, and are you even going to give them the dice in the first place?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about here. Is that when he was like, nope, try something else. Like a game that I'm starting right now with Kimmy running it is Masks.
Yeah.
And one of the cool things about Masks is you get these abilities, these super powered abilities that is just a description, like you have telekinesis, but it allows you to pick up the dice and roll to do telekinesis stuff. If you didn't have telekinesis, you couldn't do.
Yeah.
And I think that is a great example of the reverse of it. Like, there's a situation where I was playing a one-shot where I wanted to sneak up on somebody who was in a restaurant. And the GM should have said, "Nah, he'll see you." But instead, he goes, "Oh, hey, go ahead and roll." Well, I rolled a success.
Yeah.
And then, well, he sees you, moves away. Okay, now that's dirty pool.
Yeah.
That's dirty pool. So what we need to have
Yeah,
here...
it's one of those situations where in hindsight the GM probably goes, yeah, I probably shouldn't have had him roll.
Well,
Right.
And one of the beautiful things about masks, for example, is you have these high-powered things, and you can always roll, but that's because your high-powered thing can go so horribly wrong all the time because you're a kid and you don't know how to control it, right? And so that's what's great about those rolls is the stakes are high. And so there's games like Dungeon World, for example, and like you can play that game and you can play it where it doesn't feel too hard to do things because unlike a simulationist game, if you're always given a chance to roll, you kind of almost might succeed even in tasks that might seem out of your wheelhouse or a little bit hard.
That's actually why I kind of dislike Dungeon World.
But
I don't think it works.
But I've played Dungeon World and it's been fantastic because the GM will be like, "Oh, you want to do that thing? Sure. Roll like Death's Door." Like they don't even give me the chance. Like I had a friend who was like, "I'm a cleric. I have
What's
a high
Death's-
wisdom.
what's Death's
So
Door?
let me tell you, I have a high wisdom. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to try to will that rock from crushing me. Like it's rolling down the hill and I'm going to will it out of my way." And he was like fucking with the game mechanics. Like he basically wants to roll like a defy danger plus wisdom and see how 2 dice can easily make him avoid a boulder. But the proper way to answer that is for the GM to go, "Oh, just give me a death roll, basically. It's a death save. That's what
Okay.
you're doing, right?
Right.
So, like, if you're going to sit there and try to will that thing out of your way, you can do that. And now you can roll to see if you die or just get horribly maimed, right? Those are the stakes that you've just, like, opened yourself up
Okay.
to, right? Unless you can give, like, the other players an opportunity to, like, hey, your idiot friend is standing there in front of a boulder. What do? Now you're putting them in harm's way
Right.
if they want to save them. But like, let him take his own life out, right? So like, I think some of these games, they're not simulationist, and so they're not going to simulate like something reality, but it's kind of your job as the GM to then, like make it as real as possible. Not saying as real as possible, but like as interesting as possible, or
Okay.
not let people kind of like screw with the rules on that
I
one.
think you're not quite getting what I'm saying
I
here,
might not,
because
yeah.
I'm not trying to be like that you should use, especially PPG, as like a simulationist situation.
no, yeah.
It's that when something like is possible and there's a reasonable chance for them to do it, and there's an interesting complication if there's a failure. Like all of those things have to stack up together
Sure.
in order for you want to put the dice for whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, separate. Like one of the things that he says is, it's hard to be creative and come up with fun complications to simple actions that happen frequently. Why roll?
Yeah.
Right.
If there's simple actions that just let them happen. Sure, you can do that. You can break down that door.
Sure.
And like, look, you're a first level thief and you're trying to get through the trap or two, let them roll because it's not going to, it'll be interesting. But
Right.
once it gets to that point where they're just going through that, dungeon and just let them do the thing. They're competent now, right? So you're letting them do it until it becomes interesting, right? And honestly, like when I read this, I'm like, yeah, like there's so many games where you can learn these tasks. I obviously start pointing at hippie games because I love that shit. And because like sometimes they give you that experience you're not getting somewhere else. So having like if the people are interested in playing those kind of games, there's ways to kind of train them into seeing different perspectives and seeing if they like it or not. They might not.
Right.
So like The Final Girl is a game where you're playing, like we all play a pool of characters in like a slasher flick movie, and we're going to see them die one by one until there's a final character. We don't own any of those characters, and it can be so fun to see things fail and fail and fail and people die and all the funny story stuff that comes out of it, or horrible story stuff, and just experience that. And those are kind of games that you can play and see, like, are these people interested in that kind of thing? And it kind of gives them that experience, and then, I don't know.
When I first pre-read this,
Yeah.
one of the things I started thinking of was a Call of Cthulhu game I'm running, and one of the criticisms that many people, myself included, have always had with the game is the fact that percentile dice are really swingy, right? But in a situation where you're confronted with some horrible thing, having swingy dice rolls is a fantastic thing because you don't know. I mean, yeah, I got a skill of 70, but I still who knows how that roll's going to come out, right?
And that's a shoggoth there. So
Right. Yeah. And I've noticed it in the game that when things start to go sideways, it's freaking fantastic having that really swingy, unpredictable roll, not having a bell curve like a 3d6 added or something like that, or a dice pool where there's a skew towards a sort of a median result.
Right.
I almost think that I don't know if they intended it to be this way from the beginning. If they did, it's incredibly insightful. But I don't think they did. But I think there's wisdom in the fact that they've kept that dice mechanic the way it is. I mean, they've done some things to kind of ameliorate it a little bit, but
Sure.
not a lot. And it's been a fabulous experience because of it.
Yeah.
Because those failures, sometimes they're fantastic.
Yeah.
Players leave here a little shell-shocked.
They also use that same mechanic in the old. I think it's different in the new 40K, but the old 40K role-playing game. And when you're playing like the Inquisitor, like the henchman for the Inquisitor, I mean, those dice roll go bad and your head explodes. Like, oh, all right, cool. I'll just go into this really complicated character creation thing again. That's
If you're going to
awesome.
have deadly game, you should have a pretty quick character creation system.
One thing that I thought of when I was reading this is like the succeeded cost being like as things succeed at a major cost is extended actions in the game I had just run, that fucking game, whatever, World of Darkness.
Oh, yeah.
The game that I just been like,
Chronicles.
or Chronicles of Darkness,
Right.
yeah. Otherwise known as Call of Duty. You do extended actions to see how long something takes. You can also apply that same things to success. How much bullshit, how much pain, how much shit do I have to give up in order to succeed?
Right.
Or you can just fail and not give up any of that. Okay, you can try doing this like sneaky thing, climb over the wall and stuff like that. Are you willing for it to really, really hurt, or do you just want to get caught? It's up to you. You can put yourself at risk. You can put yourself in danger. That's kind of an interesting thing, I think. Especially because you can succeed, but you'll die,
Right.
which is a thing sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it is. All right.
But yeah.
All right,
there you
Axel. Axel from the UK, thank you for the email. Changing stances on RPGs and player communication triumph from Hivemind. Who would like to read that?
I will read that.
Hive mind.
Howdy, Jackers. It's been a long time since I've written in or interacted with the Happy Jacks community. This is true. I'm still around, but between work and wrangling a 2.5-year-old, I don't have much energy left for gaming. I do still manage once-a-month sessions with my home group, as well as running once-a-month public one-shots at a local board game cafe. It's the latter that I'm writing about. At the end of August, I ran a one-shot at the yet-to-be-released Alien RPG by Freya Ligon. While skeptical when I first heard about it, I've become a big fan of the game. I think it does a fantastic job of mechanizing suspense and tension, which are important in a survival horror game, and highly recommend it, despite it not being a PBTA game. Amazing, right?
How they have fallen.
Oh, it gets worse. It gets worse.
Playing and running
Or
the
better.
Alien... Way better. Playing and running the Alien RPG has also changed my opinion a bit on both GM dice fudging and the use of a GM screen. And until now, my stance on both has been an adamant don't. And that is the correct stance.
Okay.
Don't fudge dice and don't use a GM screen. However, I found myself doing both during the Alien one-shot.
Dun, dun,
There
dun.
are edge cases.
Or Edge Games, apparently.
Or edge lord games. especially for a suspense horror game.
Oh, yeah.
Like, not knowing what the hell's going on is important. Non-human antagonists have a D6 chart to determine what they do on their turn. You don't have to follow it, but I do feel it helps speed things up and takes a bit of the burden off the GM. Early in the game I ran, a pair of PCs encountered something hostile in the reactor room of a derelict ship. I rolled to see what the creature would do, and got a result with a very high chance of crushing a PC skull, killing them
Yeah.
instantly. While appropriate for a horror game, I didn't want to kill a character so early in the session. Fair enough. So I chose a less lethal attack from the list and completely whiffed on the attack roll, but that's beside the point. I also hit the die roll to determine what the creature did behind my hand. I had GM screen with me. There wasn't enough space on the table to set it up. I continued to do that for the rest of the game. While there is virtually no chance of the players remembering what die results triggered which action, I felt it would affect the cinematic feel of the game, and so kept that die roll hidden. I did make attack and notice rolls out in the open, which I felt heightened player tension when I saw how many dice I got to roll.
Nice.
So, as I mentioned above, running the new Alien RPG has made me reevaluate my stances on a few GM practices. Have any of the hosts had a similar experience? Has a game you ran or played caused you to change your opinions on mechanics or habits? The Alien one-shot also has a great example of what I'll call player triumph, and why it is important to communicate with everyone at the table. After dealing with whatever was in the reactor room, one of the players stated their technician PC would begin repairing the ship's reactor. This was one of the goals the group had been given, but would take a long time to accomplish. I explained that repairing the reactor would take 5 to 10 hours of, quote, in-game time, end quote, which would effectively sideline that character for the rest of the session, when you still had about 2 hours left. The player explained that while they wanted to keep playing, repairing the reactor was something their PC would absolutely do, and they could not think of a reason for their character to do something else. At this point, the player of the captain PC stepped up. They again clarified that the first player wanted to continue playing, and then ordered the technician PC to rejoin the rest of the group up on the bridge, which they did, and we continued the session. I thought this was a really great example of player communication, reinforcing something you've all said on the podcast on numerous occasions. Sometimes you do things because it's what your character would do. Sometimes you do things because you want to see what happens. And sometimes you do things because we're sitting around the table playing a game.
Playing a fucking game.
Thanks very much for reading my letter. I've tried to keep it short. And thanks for a decade of quality TTRPG entertainment. Here's to another 10 years. Cheers.
Thank you.
Hive Mind. Aka Kristen Osaka. I think she was the one who wrote in about Lunch Viking, which is it's a buffet in Japan. It's called Lunch Viking because smorgasbord is difficult to say, but smorgasbord comes from
Vikings.
Scandinavia, where Vikings are. The Vikings are that. So yeah, this is I think it's Lunch Viking.
It's pronounced Viking because that, and I was on a bike trip there when I first heard of it, and I'm like, why are they calling the buffet biking? I couldn't understand why.
Yeah.
It took me like 2 years to figure that out.
I gotta say, I learned that being kind of an asshole GM when I'm running Call of Cthulhu is sort of an expectation.
Yeah.
At that, when the players fail their sanity checks and they have the bouts of madness and they go running off insane, I have not pulled punches. I've had PCs unwittingly murder people or beat dogs and do all kinds of terrible things, and the players are like kind of shell shocked by it, but I mean, that's what the game is. You know, I certainly wouldn't do that in a lot of other games, but in that particular thing, I'm trying to be true to the genre, and that's true to the genre.
If you're running a 4-color like superheroes game,
right?
You're
Or Golden Sky Stories or something.
Yeah,
right.
Then you're not.
But like Alien,
Yeah.
like, a guy dies pretty early in that movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
you don't want to
but,
kill peace.
but I can see why, right? Like, especially if you're doing these are not campaign games where okay, we'll spin somebody else up or whatever. These are like one shots, right? And like in the very beginning of the game, like killing somebody off like that, I don't know.
This is why you have more crew than you have players.
Right.
I mean, that's great. Like, and I think thematically, if you're going in with this Aliens game, like again, Zombie World does this. That just came out recently, and like people die off like this, but you're not playing a character. You're playing the community, and you're temporarily playing characters until they die, and then you spin up somebody else from the community.
Okay.
So it's kind of intended to do that, and I think if you played this that way, that would work really well.
Star Trek does that too. You have a whole like extra
yeah.
cast of characters, so that when you beam down to the planet
And you get red-shirted.
you get red-shirted. It's all good.
Right. The only thing I wondered about was the one character wanting to stay and repair the reactor. I wonder if you could. I'm assuming the reason that they didn't want to sit there for 5 to 10 hours was because there was more stuff that had to happen.
Well, what it sounded like to me was like, let's say that's your character and you decide to repair. The rest of us keep doing the quest, and you're just like
Right.
out of it.
But
There's nothing-
can't the quest come to the reactor room?
That
you know what I'm
totally
saying?
like yeah,
Yeah.
you could probably play with it.
And also, have you guys ever tried to repair a generator, just like a diesel generator?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, a gas, but yeah.
there's a lot that goes into it.
Yes.
Like repairing a reactor, I think that's also a time when you could. I mean, it worked out fine, but you could be like, "Hey, man, this is like a 2-month job with like a crew of 5."
Right.
Unless you find that special widget that happens to be over there in like the bridge or something, right, or whatever.
Right. If you want it to end up happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think they handled it well. Like that was actually that could have been like some players. Not horror story, but like shitty experience, right?
sure.
Where
Yeah.
like now you get no spotlight and you don't get to play the game. So they figured out a way to do it. But yeah, there's methods, right?
Or in the Alien RPG, when you die, you get an alien to control.
The table slowly flips into.
And the,
oh my
and
God,
the
that's
game
weird.
ends and the last player character falls, and then they're all aliens.
Oh yeah,
Oh, what an
Only
interesting idea for
only
a
the
game.
cat survives.
but oh girl, how you
That's
fallen.
that's the name of the game.
Only the cat survives.
Only the cat
Yeah,
survives.
all right, I'm writing that down right now. We're gonna make this game.
Was that Jonesy?
Yeah, Jonesy.
Yeah. Only Jonesy lives.
Or just-
But then they always kill those characters off, like in the next sequel.
I know.
You find out Jonesy's just dead.
Well,
And you don't even get.
Jonesy was a cat.
yeah, I mean,
I know.
yeah.
How long was she asleep?
Too long.
Yeah, I don't know if the smooth brains can handle being asleep for that long.
Right. Or was Jonesy in the pod with her? Or
think
And she was, yeah, she
Oh,
crawled
she-
in. Just
oh,
when-
she did, okay.
yeah, which probably had its own issues, but
Right.
I don't know. But I think that was a good way of handling some of the dice fudging too. Like, I'm also not really like a dice fudger, but in this case, you're talking about it sounds like what the game is doing, and what like a lot of OSR games do is like we're gonna roll on random tables to see shit happen, right?
Right.
And like sometimes it tells you like either roll or choose something fun. And if you roll and it's not the right thing, then yeah, you choose something fun, and that just sounds like what
Yeah.
you did.
And I mean, the example of killing a character early in a game session is one of the edge cases I've always talked about.
Right.
About dice fudging.
Yeah.
And I've had that happen
like-
more than once, where it's like, this is a one shot. We all just sat down. It's 15 minutes into the game. I'm not going to kill a character because I only made 5 characters and I've only got 5 or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you get a pass.
Right. Yeah. So, all right. Thank you, Hive Mind. I appreciate the email. Write in more often, but not about PPZA.
Ooh, what was the second question? Has a game you ran or played
Oh.
and caused you to change your opinion on mechanics or habits?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Well, that's
that's
just talking about
that's
golf.
why I
Yeah.
run like tons of different games. I mean,
Right.
like all mechanics have a certain mouthfeel of like how you're supposed to play and how you're supposed to move down like that path. And the more games you read, the more games you play, like the more your opinions change and very fine new edge cases. Find out that games made in other countries are very different than American games. And so everybody should try and read and run games from other countries. Just the thought process is very
Right.
different.
I definitely think like you said, if you're going to have a superior game by making some tweaks, then obviously you make the tweaks, right? I mean, we're not talking about you're the game designer and this is your game, and like, if you're just fudging the thing, then and instead of fixing the problems in the game, that's a different situation. But yeah.
All right. Thank you, Hive Mind. A horror story and how not to remove a player from Greg in Virginia Beach.
So I
This story is both funny and terrible.
get to read this one?
Sure.
Lucky me. Hey there, happy whackers and other assorted douche nozzles. I thought you might enjoy or find this story interesting. Apologies in advance if I ramble a bit. Maybe a little bit.
That's not a jib email, is it?
No,
No,
it's not that bad.
It's less than 6.
Yeah. I play in a
Not even
weekly
two.
I play in a weekly D&D session with a good group of people. We've had some players come and go over the years for various reasons, but the same core group of guys have been playing together for a long time. This is a story about the first time we had to uninvite someone from the group. We play at Bill's house, mainly because he owns damn near every D&D book Wizard of the Coast have published in the last 15 years. You should also know that Bill is a functional alcoholic, although functional is being polite. Another guy in the group, Tim, met a girl and got hitched. Tim's wife, Kat, is very clingy and couldn't let him out of the house unless she was with him.
Wow, this already sounds like a bad sitcom.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. Meaning she tagged along to every D&D session. Kat is overall a good person, although very loud. The quieter the room is, the more she feels she needs to yell. Even though we had a full table, Bill was eager to invite Kat to join the group when she started showing up. This was Kat's first tabletop RPG experience, and even though we all tried to be welcoming and helpful to a new player, you'll see how things started to go downhill. We soon learned that Kat only cared about combat and couldn't care less about role-playing. She only played fighters, or played her character as a fighter, even if it was a different class, didn't engage in any role-play, refused to be diplomatic at all, and had the briefest of backstories just to explain why her only tactic was, I run into combat and stand in one spot attacking wildly until everything is dead. To make matters worse, if we were in combat and it wasn't Kat's turn, she would totally zone out. She'd put on headphones and listen to music.
Oh, shit!
Or pull out her knitting and completely ignore the game. I have thoughts
haven't-
on that, but that's cool. And when combat was over, if we wanted to talk to NPCs, interrogate bad guys, etc., Kat would actually whine and complain about how she didn't want to do it and how boring it was. If the role-playing went on for too long, she would get up from the table and wander away like she had better things to do. This went on for months. Bill took her aside and tried to talk to her. Tim tried to talk to her several times. But no matter what, Kat just wasn't interested in the game if she wasn't actively in combat.
She wants to play a board game.
That's
Yeah,
what I'm
sounds
hearing
like-
so
yeah.
far.
Yeah.
So this brings me to the incident. After one especially tough combat, Kat started yelling and screaming at another player, Ben, about how he played his character during that encounter. Ben was playing a healer and did what healers are supposed to do, but it wasn't good enough for Kat. Not only did she insult Ben's characters about how useless and poorly created the character was,
Wow.
she also started cursing and insulting Ben, saying how bad of a player he was and how little she thought of his role-playing abilities. ROLL playing abilities.
The
apparently.
board game.
Right.
Ben definitely wasn't going to let that slide. He pointed out everything that she had been doing wrong since joining the group. It turned into a yelling match with Kat turned up to 11. The session fell apart, and we
one
all
louder.
left feeling a bit weird about what had just happened.
It's one louder, isn't it?
Why not just have
10
10
louder and
louder and have 10 be that loud?
Well, this one goes to 11.
During the next week, we had a private conversation about what to do with Kat and whether she was really a good fit for the group. Bill said he would take charge and have an adult talk with her. That never happened. Following the session, Bill
Here's
was
the good part.
Yeah, Bill was about 10 beers in when everyone showed up.
10 beers.
Someone was a little nervous.
Right.
Tim and Kat were the last two to arrive, and you can probably guess what happened next. Please tell us. In a drunken haze, Bill tried to explain that the group was just too big, and even though we gave it a good try, it just wasn't working out with Kat. Didn't say anything about her behavior or how the other players felt. It was an extremely uncomfortable 10 minutes. Ben left the room, and I sat there with my head down, too embarrassed to say anything. Someone should have stopped Bill, but no one did. Kat left in tears and dragged Tim with her. She started GMing her own game, and we haven't seen her or Tim since.
Oh, well, everybody wins.
Right.
Things have cooled off a bit since then.
Except for Bill's liver.
Bill's liver always loses.
Right.
Things have cooled off a bit since then, although Kat refuses to play in Bill's game. Well, It sounded like she was uninvited. And Ben will never play in a game with her again.
Oh, Ben was the guy that was chewed out. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill joined Cat's Game, so their DM tried Cat's Game just to check it out, and it seemed okay. Cat has been trying to lure the rest of us away from Bill's game, but no one is really interested, and that's where things stand now. Maybe there's a bit of wisdom to be learned from this story, but fuck all if I can figure it out. Thanks for all that you do, Greg in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Oh man, best of intentions.
I want to know: is Cat's Game exclusively combat, or, as from the GM's point of view, has she suddenly discovered that role playing actually, it can be an interesting thing?
I don't know.
Was it a lesson learned? I would love to know.
So I'm going to be honest. Like, I was reading this email, and you know, I'm very curious. Like, what is reality and what is not reality here?
Okay.
Only because, like, from the beginning, there's a lot of, you know, we're the guys and this is our guys' game. And then
right.
this girl shows up and she's very clingy and wouldn't let him out of the house unless he goes. But we tried to give it she's overall a good person, although very loud. We tried to give it a shot. And, like, I'm not saying you didn't give
you're
it a
reading
shot.
between the lines a little bit there.
Kind of like,
I see what you're saying.
I'm saying I don't read this and go, this is reality. I go, this is somebody's view of reality.
Sure.
And, like, maybe Kat is a horrible person. I mean, if she really yelled at Ben, like, that's pretty horrible shit. That sucks. And yes, some people should have, like, stood up and said some shit about that.
Right. Maybe not after 10 beers.
Right.
This
The
is
following week.
I mean, I have dated somebody like this before. Alexis! Who's just a terrible person. But, like, nobody wants to say it for whatever reason until
Shit blows up.
shit blows up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, it could be just from the beginning, she was not the right fit for this group. They had a good thing going, right, with their RPG stuff, and they seem to have, like, their mode of, like, what balance of combat and not combat and all that stuff that they wanted. And then she came in and kind of, like, upset those balances, right?
Well,
and she was very vocal about it. That's what I'm
If
kind
she
of-
literally put on headphones and listened to music while other people are doing stuff,
Yeah.
that right there is like, all right.
Yeah, that's some disrespectful shit.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure, absolutely.
Right?
Well,
Now-
we had not this bad. We had a similar situation, but the genders were reversed, where someone was playing World of Warcraft at the table during combats when it wasn't their turn.
Oh yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We did.
So-
Like what? All right. You know, it's been swell, but the swelling's gone down. It's difficult to figure out when to talk to somebody though. Like, oh well, she's new. I want to give her a chance.
Well, I would start early. I mean, especially if it's a brand new player. If you notice problems in the first session, send them aside. I mean, obviously, you don't have 10 beers and then do it in front of everyone else. You talk to them on. Now they said that they did that, but what was the? I would love to know how those conversations went. You know what I mean? Because, I mean, especially if you're a brand new player. They don't know what's going on yet.
Yeah.
They don't have, and they certainly don't have the confidence to go around criticizing other players for how they're doing it. So, there's something missing. There's a piece
stuff
missing
going on here. And like, how long was this experience? Like, if Kat's been playing with them
is
for
it
like
8 years?
Or is it 3 sessions?
right.
Because you know, if she's a hardcore board game player, which I know many people who are, and she's like, oh, there's a board game where they talkie in between.
Yeah.
Cool. I know how to board game.
Yeah.
So learns all the board game rules, does her stuff. You know, I do my fighty stuff, and people heal me, and that's how we all work together.
Why are we wasting time talking now?
Yeah. And if nobody talks to her about it,
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're not playing the board game. Well, they'll let me know when the board game's happening.
Right.
So
'cause that's what I
I think this email to me leaves me with more questions than answers. Like, especially like, how's Kat's game? Like, I want to see what
I
Kat's
wanna know
game
Kat's
is.
game.
I want to know because the thing is maybe what happened is what happened, and
Right.
the fact that she got kicked out of this game made her had an epiphany, and maybe is now a fabulous GM.
Or maybe she's just running like,
Combat after
war
combat.
games. Yeah,
Right.
which is
like
fine.
D&D module, old D&D module.
The one comment
Fight
I
after
will
fight.
make has to do with knitting.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know that some people like do that kind of stuff at the table. And for me personally, like I need to concentrate. I need to see what's going on. Like I want to see the faces and I want to see everybody interacting.
Right.
But there is definitely a set of folks I've gamed with who are like, my way of dealing with like either, too much stamina or other stuff is to sit there and do something like the fidget spinner type stuff or whatever. And some people love to like knit or whatever. And I'm not saying that's what Kat was doing here because I have no clue.
Right.
But like,
I also know people who, like, they love role-playing, love hanging out with people, but if they can also be productive, whatever that means,
All right. Well, I mean,
it's very satisfying for them.
I mean, prior to Comic-Con, Kimmy will sit here and like gold leaf stuff while we're playing.
Right.
That's not that's not a problem. I mean, and that's but she's still engaged in the game.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not my turn.
All right.
so,
Or like, hey, it's your turn. What? Oh, okay, hold on.
Hold on a second. I'm in a raid.
some people are multitaskers. I've seen Kimmy do that like so many times on the show where she's like interacting with the chat room and then she's like right on board with you guys.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think the first time I tried to do like some streaming things like I can do this, I can't do that.
No.
Like not at all.
I have what's called a deficiency in attention. And so if I start doing that, I won't listen to anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
There's a
can't do it
game
all.
going on? What? Oh, holy cow!
Holy moly. I tried to like pay attention to the chat, like not even right, but just like see what is happening in the chats once when I was GMing.
Right.
Yeah, it didn't go well.
What I would love to do, like the best thing would be if we got a letter from every different person in this scenario just to see the different views of what actually happened.
I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that Greg in Virginia Beach, that may not even be his real name, and he may not have told these players that these actors in this story that he was writing in, and he would probably not want them to hear our response. But yes,
But that's what I would want.
Yes, I would want that. I want that too. I would love to know what to.
I want Cat to Streamer games.
Yeah.
That's what I want. I want to see that.
I'm very curious because I mean that can be like that sort of come to Jesus moment where it's like, oh yeah, afterwards, after the fact that the dude had 10 beers and it was the worst way to kick someone out of. Worst? No, it's probably not. We've had people email with worse ways, I believe, but I mean, not a great way to kick someone out of a game. After a couple of days, you have a little bit of self-reflection, like, oh, maybe I was going to be an asshole. You know what I mean?
There is a board game that I really want, but it's like $1,000 because like all of the miniatures are like 3D printed to like 2 microns. They're all like custom and beautiful, but all of the there are no like they're only boss monsters. There are no like minions or whatever. But it's one of those situations where kind of like in the zombie RPG where you have a community that you're playing, and you could absolutely have this board game and start while you're hunting. Every time you go out, you're hunting a monster because those are the only resources that exist. Because you wake up like with a rock and nothing else in this maze of stone faces. There's no food. There's no water. Everything you have to get to survive comes from monsters.
Oh, okay. Right.
That's a cool place to be in and to interact with that you could start to interact with while being very like game heavy. Like
Oh yeah, it would be very, very like it's all combat and mechanics at first.
But you're a group of people with rocks
rocks that have to kill monsters and
Right.
like make clothes out of them and like learn how to read and shit.
Wow.
I'm like,
You said a board game that costs $1,000. I figured you were talking about Warhammer.
Or there's that. What's that?
Yeah, it's easily
something
costly.
Kingdom? No,
Kingdom Death.
Kingdom Death.
what
That's
it's
not
called.
it. Oh, is that
It
what
is,
it's called?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
heard of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like some crazy Kickstarter.
Yeah, it was a crazy Kickstarter.
All right. Well, thank you, Greg, in Virginia Beach, for the email. But yeah, you know what? If you're willing to let people know that you wrote this email in, we'd love to hear other perspectives.
I'd love
Love to hear Kat's
Love to hear
perspective.
Kat's perspective. Love to hear Bill's perspective. I mean, it could be like 2 sentences. It'll probably be scrawled on
It was 12 beers.
a beer can. Yeah.
Wait,
All right.
12 beers before that or what I did later? All right.
All right. I'm gonna end it.
All right.
Where's my song? There it is. Thank you for joining us for season 25, episode 13 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
This is Tappy.
And Tones.
And we'll see you next week, 7 p.m.-ish, 7:03 p.m. Pacific time, Friday, Happy Jack's Rogue/Live. Join us then. And thank you very much for coming again, Tones. I appreciate it. Come on, often as you want, man.
Thanks.
And we'll leave with a song. In vain, for the host will drink and yammer on till no emails remain. Oh, Happy Jack's our patron saint of the skillful game master. Oh, guide us well with yes ending to avert a disaster. Whether fate or GURPS or millions of apocalyptic acts, fellow listeners and every host will always have our back. Unless you're playing D&D and then they'll give you crap.
Drink on me, lads, and I will sing a song of heroes, of all the bravest Englishmen that sail across the sea, meeting all of England's foes in fearsome battle, that by the grace of God England shall always be. So raise your tankards high and sing along with me. That by the grace of God England shall always be, always be, always be. That by the grace of God England shall always be. The Spanish do invade our shores to vanquish England. A toast, me lads, to all the men who fight to keep her free, driving back the Spanish horde with ships of fire. That by the grace of God England shall always be. So raise your tankards high and sing along with me. That by the grace of God England shall always be, always be, always be. That by the grace of God England shall always be. While drinking good sorority, they were barely seamen. A brave and fearsome fighter who sailed for Brittany. And when they hear his name, Spaniards tremble. That by the grace of God England shall always be. So raise your tankards high and sing along with me. That by the grace of God England shall always be, always be, always be. That by the grace of God England shall always be. So now, me lads, methinks 'tis time we join these heroes and drink a toast to each of them and their heroic deeds. On land and sea we shall defend a gracious nation. That by the grace of God England shall always be. So raise your tankards high and sing along with me. That by the grace of God England shall always be, always be, always be. That by the grace of God England shall always be, always be, always be.
The preceding program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire.
Bum, 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 bum.